2001, Josephine O'Hara, the youth leader in St Patrick's Youth Club Mayobridge, informed us that there was a possibility of securing some funding to develop a cross-generation project that would record life experiences in Mayobridge village throughout the 20th century.
A number of young people from the youth club were recruited to develop a project that would record the experiences of the senior citizens of the village, their lives and times as young people growing up in the last century.
So the Bible says.
It was decided that the most practical and productive way to record the project would be to film an invited audience of senior citizens at an informal evening's entertainment in the club and to have a bit of crack about times gone by. The following is our record of experiences in Mayobridge down through the years. We hope you enjoy it.
Hello, my name is Adele Grant.
Hello, my name is Michelle McNamee.
Hello, my name is Cara Gallagher, and we are all part of the Mayobridge Youth Club.
It's about 5 miles outside Newry in County Down.
And we all took part in the Young at Heart project.
And what was the school like?
Well, it was alright. There was a stove and gas sticks by the fire in the evenings before we left. Put a gas sticks for the next morning.
And had you any friends there?
I had loads of friends. McAleenans and the McLeans and McDonald's and Marlins and McAvoy's, Collins.
And what type of stove had you?
Just a wee ordinary stove, just a wee no fashion stove.
The pot belly one?
That's right, yes.
Maybe you could tell us that the pot belly stove has been in the gas school until it was knocked down a few years ago, and that was still given the heating up until, what, 3 years? That's still how the school has been heated from your day?
That's right, yes.
Well, to set the period for you, I was born on the 1st of January 1925, and I was born in a house called the Nail Rods. I'm sure not too many of you would know.
I know
who a nail rod was.
I don't know who what a nail rod is.
Nail rod was a profession, in fact. Nails were made by hand, and it was termed a trade in those days. And he wasn't there obviously whenever we occupied it, but it was a roomy kitchen, very much what any country house would have been in those days. No bathroom, no running water, no electric light, no gas, plenty of crack. The only strange feature about the house that you don't see in houses today was that immediately through the door on the right hand side was a structure which was just, it was a wooden wall, but they called it a Holland wall. Whether they meant it was a Dutch wall or a feature of a house in Holland, I'm not sure, but it was called a Holland wall. And the only purpose for it was that maybe stop the draft from getting into the kitchen, or maybe protected the people from outsiders seeing, maybe give them a degree of privacy maybe. But by and large that was the house, and we had to take our water from a well maybe about 200 yards away. And in September of 28, that school term, I would have been about 3.5, was when I first went to school. And like most features, which was a big event to me in my first day of school, my mother packed me off with a bunch of flowers, of all things, and my sister Kathleen was taking me to the hand, and of course we arrived late and prayers was in course, and Sister Philomena was keeping order, and of course we went through the door with this big bunch of flowers, and a whole pile of oohs and ahs, and everybody buying these flowers, but everybody except Sister Philomena. she didn't take a bit kindly to this interruption. But that was my first appearance to a school door. And from then on, it was just 10.5 years to go. But I'd have to say that I'm sure like most people, I enjoyed my school years. I certainly had no great problems. I don't think I was ever late in my life for school. I always enjoyed it. I'd been at school at about 20 to 9 in the morning, most mornings. And to give myself plenty of time to kick football, I would eat my lunch, which was intended for lunchtime. I did that going up the road to school. I'd have to take 4 minutes.
You weren't the only one.
And Mrs. Keenan, God bless her, was the school cleaner. And when we would be early, when I say we, I'm talking about my sister Kathleen, May and myself, she would ask us to assist her with lighting the fires and doing a bit of brushing and dusting and what have you. And we were paid with clove rock sweets. I don't know if you've ever seen clove rock sweets. They're a red interior with a very slim white to the outside of them. And that's just how valuable sweets were, because we were prepared to work just to get a sweet. My job would be filling coal and carrying it into the school room. Maybe we do a bit of dust or whatever. Sister Evangelista, when I moved from Philomena's room, Master McAvoy, who to me in those days, and still was, maybe, he was a giant of a man, 6'3" probably, and I suppose 18 stone. And he came into the school and he had a chair swinging in one hand and he planked it down in the middle of the floor and he sat on it facing the back of the chair, you know. And we were all lined up in front of him, and if I had 17 apples in that pocket there, and if I had 17 apples in that pocket there, how many apples would I have? So by a whisker I managed to get 34 said before Frank really said it. And I was rewarded with a sixpence. Now a sixpence. It was sixpence. You know, in 1931 or 2 was a lot of money. And I just can't tell you how I spent it, but I have a shrewd suspicion that it was probably confiscated by my mother. I just can't go into that detail. But anyway, we all progressed down to Sister Evangelista. And Sister Evangelista was an English woman.
Oh,
In spite of the name, her name I think was Kathleen Walsh.
That's great.
She was by accident in some ways appointed to Mayobridge. When the appointment was first made, it was another nun, and I forget her name, but she took ill. And Mother Evangelista, who had previously been turned down for the job, then received the job. And that was the best thing that ever happened in Mayobridge. I could definitely say that was one of the best things that ever happened for the young men of Mayobridge, because Sister Evangelista was a real man's woman. She was as big as a man, and she was as strong as a man. And you wouldn't have to be in our class too long till you knew that, either.
you're right.
See, she got all our hippies and pennies from us, and she was always encouraging men to be men, you know. She was forever teaching you poems about courage and all that type of thing. And she collected our pennies and halfpennies until we had 9 and 6pence, which was the price of a size 5 football, large competition leather ball. And she even instructed us how to blow it up. Except we needed instruction how to blow up a ball, but we got it anyway. And she had this pump, and she took it out to some extent and push it down, and she'd emphasise, now that's far better than doing 2 or 3 V shortness. Up again it's full length and down, you see. And this ball would be taken up to the convent and well and truly lubricated with castor oil. Yes, castor oil. And when she was going, when they were at Mass, which was at 8:30, she religiously left that ball out on the windowsill. knowing that I would be up for about 29, and take it down, and we would play till 9:30, which would blow our whistles, and everybody trooped into the schoolroom, and every window that would open, she would open. Not one, but every one of them. And we had to take in, maybe 5 or 6 large breaths of fresh air to get us started. Down on the knees then, say the prayers, and the prayers was the least bit of our trouble. It was kneeling on even hard wooden floors, cut the knees in, because everybody had short trousers, you see. But by the time we got up, I can tell you, after the north wind blowing through these windows in a winter's day, we were well and truly awake, I can tell you. But she was very rigid in her discipline. Senior boys were appointed. If she left the room, there was no trouble. Silence. And they were duly put in charge. But I would say that educationally, I probably learned more from Sister Evangelista than I did from any other teacher. She was just that type of person. And that's just talking about education, and there was lots of other aspects of our lives that she would greatly influence as well. But when we left her then after 3rd class and joined McAvoy,
Education.
it was like getting out of the army. A different regime altogether. No prayers, no such thing as prayers in this curriculum at all.
No homework.
Well, yes, there was homework, if it didn't matter much if it was done or not. We did homework. And he carried his pocket, his watch in his pocket. An ordinary pocket watch, but he had no attachments to it, no chain on it. And he would take it out and he'd twist his hand around like this to look at it, just say, "Time to go home, that's all you hear." That, in other words, get out. But anyway, that was the careless bit of him. In other ways, he was before his time. He would have been a good teacher 30 years afterwards, because he had very futuristic ideas, and he had geographical magazines, which no doubt he was getting on a monthly basis, and he would take those to school and give them to whoever he thought would be interested in them. And a geographical magazine to a child in 1935 was opening up a lot of the world that you wouldn't have seen, nor indeed didn't see until television really came in, because holidays were, and there was no such thing as a holiday. You got a day on the point on the 15th of August or something, but there was no such thing as holidays, foreign holidays, not at all. So anyway,
It wasn't generally radio either, really, or television.
not at all. My father in about 1934 or 5 bought through the post a crystal wireless set.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that you couldn't hear, but with these headphones you could hear it.
Yeah.
And he had assembled it himself. The instructions with it, and he assembled it. And when he'd be listening to the football results on a Saturday night, which couldn't be missed, that was all important. He would take one earphone out of the headset and give it to me, and I would be sitting as close as this to him, and I'd have one ear to it, and he would have one ear to it, and we knew who won and who didn't win, all about it. And they would be marked out on a newspaper, you see, and when the neighbours would come in then at night, Joe Grant or Todd Berry or Don or anything in the Woodses, he could tell them who won, and the teams that would really be of interest to us would have been Glasgow Celtic, Motherwell, because my father was born in Motherwell, and of course Belfast Celtic. And those are the teams that we've been supportive of.
Well, the thing that defined it was that you had to go on a bicycle. Well, you wouldn't be going up to Lacey's or away to Dundalk or anything like that. Because as well as going, you had to come home. And maybe see your wee girl going too, like that, and she lived in a different direction. So taking as short a journey as possible.
And that's where you met your
That's where you
partners.
met, right, yeah. And Oh, only getting home on the bar of the big ship. That's right.
Were the bicycle clips then equivalent to a car keys now, if you were out at a...
That's true.
You just couldn't switch the keys with what's so handy, you know?
If you had no clips, you had to pull your sock up out over the head of your trousers.
Yes.
Keep it from getting greasy on the bicycle chain. And the thing was, you see,
Sorry.
if you went to a strange northern, maybe he was dancing with one of the local girls, like say maybe in Burn, and maybe the Burn fellas weren't too happy about it. When you went out, your bicycle had to be flat. So you got the message.
But then you had the cautious guy that would have come, and I remember them well, come to Mayobridge, and they'd have a spare tube round their shoulder and wrap round them. So that in case they're going to puncture, they would have a spare tube with them. And he would come with his pump and his lamp and the spare tube, and the whole lot of it deposited up on the stage until the dance was over.
When I left school and I had to get work, I couldn't sit at home. There was no such thing as what there is for the young ones now, like the old money, you had to go and get your own. So my mum took me to Newmarket and over to the hiring ground in Europe. And I was given half a crown in my hand, and that was my earnest money. So I couldn't say no to the man that hired me then. I couldn't go and get hired anywhere else. So I was hired and came home, and my mum put the things in the case, and I was put in the bus and went into Newry to the back of the mile and was put in the bus from there to Armagh. And I worked there for 6 months, and well, you only had about £6 I suppose, or maybe a little more at the end of your 6 months, and you daren't go home. You daren't go home, because if you left that job, you had no money. You had to stay till it was, till your 6 months was up.
And did you get visiting home in that time?
No, it was too far to come home and I didn't get home. And I had to stay, all I could do was write letters.
And what type of work were you doing?
Farm work, milking cows, carrying water from the race, down breaking the ice on it in the morning for to put into the big pot to fill the pot up in the shower house and blow it up. There are big fan bells blowing it up. And you were there from about 6:30 in the morning, and I wasn't even in the inside of the house, I was on the outside of the house, and the out shop that was there for me. And it was a cement floor and a jug in the corner and a basin with cold water in it, and that's what you washed it in the morning. And she would have been out in the morning and knocked you up at 6:30, and you worked away there all day. So it was hard work, all right, but you got through it.
Did you say that you were, generally speaking, were you being reasonably treated or were you harshly treated?
Oh, I wasn't very well treated up there. No, it was very hard to work. He wasn't as bad to work for as she was. She was very, very hard.
That's what women were all like that,
They owned a shop, where people owned a shop in Newry and Elliott's. She was Elliott.
Was she?
Yeah, she was one of the Elliott's in Newry.
Right.
What were you fed in?
Well, you got your breakfast and that, but if there was anything else going, you got your dinner. And if there was anything like, really nice going or ahead of time like that day, you weren't included in that. Although your ration book was there. It was ration, but your ration book was there. And I came Christmas Day, and I never saw, you just laugh and I tell you, I never saw goose cooked in my life Christmas Day, and I saw it up there. But I got no goose. I didn't get my Christmas dinner. There was none. They had all their visitors in and all the rest of it, and you were just, no, you were left.
I met my wife in Brookhall, both locals. We were married at 8 o'clock in the morning. There was no, the meal was on a wedding breakfast. It wasn't a dinner. No. And then the next trip from the church was to the photographer's rooms to have your photograph taken. Duffner's at the time. In Hill State was the main one. And from that to wherever your wedding breakfast was.
But before that, the breakfast would have been at home.
Yes. That's where I had mine. I had my wedding breakfast at home.
And why so early in the morning?
But that was the time it had to be just.
The time the mass.
That's the time the masses were on.
More
There were no
masses
evening
were
masses
eight o'clock.
just been at that time. You know, evening masses came much later. So if you wanted to get married and you want to be natural, you were married at mass, it would be a morning, because that's when the masses were.
And that was the only reason why that was the time the mass was.
And there was no big push breakfast now like what they have now. You come home and had your breakfast in the house, and then you went away just for the day. You didn't go for a honeymoon then, you just went off for a day. And you came back home, and then you had a party that night. And everybody came. Didn't matter who they were, whether they were asked or where they weren't, they just came down and enjoyed themselves.
Not a much making that time. I remember one occasion I was working in Drumsbar. And it was hit to Fair Day. And these pair of men arrived in, and they had been talking about it, and one man had decided that it was time the other man went to a certain house and got his future wife. So they decided on the spur of the moment they would buy a bottle of whiskey and go and do it. So they bought the bottle of whiskey and they had it off. Well, it had been a mile and a half, 2 miles to where this girl lived, and she lived alone with her mother. But when they arrived there, and they were both slightly intoxicated, their mother didn't like what she saw, and she chased the lot and told them to come back when they were sober. So they did go back, and they got married, and they lived on the Bala Valley Road there for years and years, and both of them are just passed away inside the last 2 or 3 years. And that was a quite common occurrence.
What about the man that went and there was 3 daughters in the house? You were telling us before about the man who went with 3 daughters in the house, and after the couple of glasses of whiskey, went to leave him.
What's that way? Yes, I wanted to know about what dairy was with him.
Oh.
Well, he asked what the dairies were, you see. And the first one was tall, thin, she wasn't an oil painting. So there was £100 on one of the cows with her. And the next one was smaller, better looking, and there was 2 cows with her along £100. But they told him it was the best looking one in the whole lot, and he took her and he got 2 cows and £200. That did happen. It was quite a long
Can you
time
say-
ago though.
What a dairy was, just...
Right?
The dairy, that's what it was called. If you could explain that, you know.
Yeah. The dairy was a wedding present from the bride's parents to the bride. That's really what, not a dairy.
To start the new home.
Starting the new home.
But it's been her share of the family farm or residence in a sense. Usually as much as the father could afford, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or she's hanging about too long and she'll probably have a very bit of her own maybe, which would have helped. And I suppose as years went on he would increase his amount as well. But there's quite common arranged marriages.
Yeah. The size of that dairy would have been determined by the 2 men that went with the groom. And they call it going to ask the woman, you know. And just as he says, they would have taken a bottle of whiskey out of it to put their father in there. The men of the mood. And then the father would say, well, if you're going to get married to Maggie Allen or whatever her name was, there'll be £100 along with her. And then one of the main spokesmen that would be along with the groom, he would say, oh, well now we were expecting 200, you see, and they would pour more whiskey out and bargain. It was an awful custom like that, you know. And anyway, maybe they would have made the deal and shook hands on it, and a month or so they would arrange the date of the wedding, and that had been it.
You'll have to take things easy now. Well, I'm getting very old. And I spend more time by the fire. God, these winter nights is cold. Sure, a man gets queer and lonesome when the blood is getting thin, and all he has is memories when he's neither kith nor kin. Well, now, I wasn't always on my own. No, I once had a wife and a wean. I did with peace and content, if nothing more. We hadn't one cause to complain. Sure, she was a hard-going wee woman, God rest her soul. Well liked through the whole town land, and a heart big enough that would mother a score. But your God sent us only the one. Oh, deed, I can picture him now, with his wee curly head, and them two eyes darting with fun. He'd be meeting me there at the foot of the lane, when the evening's work was done, and I would reach for him and carry him up in my arms. Yes, and the wife would be wetting the tea. Do you know, I wouldn't have swapped for a lord in his castle when it come to the close of the day. Yes, we were happy then in our bit of a home, and the wee time that God let us be, but the years slipped away, and in no time at all he was half a head bigger. Yes, a quiet growl of a lad, with the same curly head, I and the innocent heart of a wean, and them two laughing eyes. Oh, God, I remember so well, waiting there at the foot of the lane. Well, now, there was no work around in the First World War, but the money in England was good, so he took a notion of crossing to try his hand. Not even his mother could change his mood. It was then that they conscripted him into the army. I him that wouldn't hurt a fly, and when the fighting started in Flanders Field, because he was one of the first to die. Well, she didn't say much when she heard the news. No, she took the rosary beads from the shelf and straight away down to the chapel she went. I followed her there myself, but she done no good from that time on. No, she just seemed to fade away, and in 12 months' time from the lad was killed. Well, she too was beneath the clay. So that's the way I'm on my own, and that's the way I stayed. Just a thran old man that doesn't care how soon in the earth I'm laid. Although I might have an odd drink or a crack with the boys at a time like Patrick's Day. All the days have been lonely, aye, and the nights have been long since my own two went away. Do you know there's a saying, but I sometimes doubt it. They tell me time heals many's a sore. Well, my tired old heart, do you know, it's longing to be with the two of them just once more. And do you know, I'm going to tell you, the both of them's dead over 40 years. I am still, I can feel the pain. But please God, we'll meet in heaven above. I myself, the wife and the wean.
times is, brother. And I had to walk to school when I was going, and everyone in my day had to go walking. And then they would come down at the buses and everything lifted, nearly at their own doorstep, and they'd come again. And then when they go to school, they have a good dinner and they have good heated school, they have no sticks together or anything like that. Oh, they don't want them. And then there's days that they get out for a day, maybe with about part with the zoo and maybe someplace away. They get their outings and they go lots of places. I think the youngsters is a good time there, I'd say. But it's just very sad there's so many drugs and other things on the money. That's one of the bad things I would say. There's too many young people going into these things, and I hope none of you are here doing that. You dare. I hope not. And I hope you know anybody just advise them not to do it, for it. I think that's the ruination of it, of the young people. But I think most of the young people are very good. And I must say that about them. These chairs, they done good work. Yeah, and I think the times it's a lot better. Yeah, they'll have a bit of sense and take the good of it. That's my opinion.
Daisy? Daisy, what's your opinion?
Well, what you said is correct 100%. But talking about travelling to school, if the people going to school now had to go the way we went, there would be an awful lot of kilometres on the road and tragedies, because the traffic is no comparison. The fastest thing we saw on the road was a horse and cart. And you know, it would be impossible for children not to be collected at school and delivered to school. Right. Times were bad, but children were happier then than they are now. They were more contented with their lot, I think. Food was plain, clothes were, well, scarce, but they were amply covered. And they were happy with their lot. Christmas wasn't a big thing for them compared to now. Birthdays went past, nobody noticed them.
Well, there was nobody different from anybody else. Like Desi and my time, there was a worldwide slump in 1929, and everybody, it affected everybody, and jobs were scarce. And at that time, there were men worked for nothing in quarries to get stamps on, that they could get unemployment, and wages were, a roadman's wages was round about 19 shillings a week, and although food was cheaper and clothes were cheaper, but what we would call essentials now were luxuries in those times. Like, nobody would have had a second suit or a second good shirt or a second pair of shoes. Just didn't have that. And like, a very big treat would be, like, say on the 15th of August when you'd have got to Warren Point, you'd have got ice cream, if you had like maybe sixpence or so then. But sixpence was a lot of money. To give you its value, it would have bought you 60 Danny Boy caramels, nice chocolate caramels. They were 10 a penny. So like, when people say sixpence, I don't know what 60 sweets would cost now.
And that 6 was
then there was the
ration.
Yeah, that's right. Then there was the rationing came on in the Second World War in 1939, and food was scarce. It wasn't so bad for people in the country because they'd always a chance of getting a few eggs, even if they hadn't them themselves from somebody who had, or a wee bit of butter. But there was only 2 ounces of bacon per head, a half pound of sugar, 2 ounces of butter per week, and that just meant like that if there was a fry on Sunday morning, that was the end of the frying for that week. And clothes were scarce too. If you had to have coupons for clothes, and that would have got you, say, maybe a shirt and a couple of pairs of socks, and maybe a pair of shoes or boots. But then if there was a wedding or anything like that in the house, well, there was no shoes or there was no boots like that. The girl that was getting married, like she would have had she got your coupons like to buy her a bit of a rig out for going away. And that didn't, the rationing didn't, the war ended in 1945, the rationing went on to the 50s, the early 50s, and then it went off and there was plentiful of food, plentiful supply of food. But then jobs were scarce and a lot of people, you would have gone over to England like from maybe when you were 16 or 17 years of age and sort of try to find work on the building sites in England. And then maybe in the 60s things improved quite a bit then too, and there was more travel and people were generally better off. That's a sort of summary of those years.
I did, Willie,
I would think that the biggest, the big influence in my early life from 14 was the onset of war. And with that came affluence that wasn't there hitherto, because suddenly there was new airfields being built and there was all types of activities going on. And I, at 17, was earning about £6 a week. And that was, you know, in 44, that wasn't anything but bad, I can tell you. I was doing 60 hours a week for that, but that didn't matter, you see, that didn't count. You had the money and therefore you could do a bit more dancing. I didn't smoke or drink in those days, and dancing would have been my main activity, that and taking football. But educational wise, the Education Act was the big change. That was the big change in education. When everybody was on an equal, on a level playing field, all you needed was the brains. And if you had the brains, you could get there. If you used them. Lots of people had them but didn't use them. And university was available to those who could make it. 100% grants in many cases, in most cases. Some wasted their time, blew out of it in the first year. Others more cautious and made it through. Vast majority of people availed of that education. The advent of communications, media, daily papers, as opposed to one weekly paper. If you were lucky, you got a Sentinel. In my early days, a weekly paper with news maybe a fortnight old, a daily paper, television. I don't say it was unnecessary, when you can sit in your own house and watch events throughout the world. You know, I can remember we didn't have an electric until maybe about 55 or 6, but from about 49 on, with the aid of a generator, so we had television, and it was black and white and maybe only a 14-inch screen, but you could still see world title fights and you name it, it was there. And that to me was suddenly, children were being educated just by looking at these things. And I still would be an advocate, I know there are many who are not, but I would still be an advocate of the 11 plus.
Yeah.
Because I think somewhere along the line, the cream has got to come to the top of the mountain. Somewhere. And, you know, 11, in my opinion, from what experience that I've had, was a suitable age. I had 2 who missed it, 2 girls, and they were told quite bluntly that it was their own flightiness that didn't get it. And they went to St Mary's in Uri and were later transferred from there back into the Sacred Heart and came through it with, I think, Finola got something like 10 O's and in our intermediate, and flew through into our A's and went to university. She developed that a wee bit later, but that was her own fault. Those who could make it and should have made it, could have made it at 11 just as handy as 13. That's just purely my opinion from my experience.
So, well, the good and bad things maybe the change.
being a younger member of this present group. That's just a little bit. No, my past pupils will speak up and contradict me. I wouldn't have the experience of the other participants here, you know, regarding work life and stuff like that, because I entered when I was 15 years old. So all I know about life would be school life. And my school life wouldn't have been very happy. You know, my own school life, you know, there was very, very strict discipline. There was, you were slapped for things you didn't do, things you didn't know. There was no kind of an understanding that you were maybe good at different things on the curriculum. Maybe you were arty or you were musical, the lovely music we heard here today. You know, there was none of that differentiation. There was just, you had to be good at everything. And if you weren't good at your sums or something, you got slapped for not having them right. If you weren't good at your English or your geography and history. So that would be my experience as a child. But coming on then and looking at the children of today, I'm absolutely thrilled with the variety they have in their lives. And I have found, in teaching over 40 years here in Mayobridge, I have found great fulfilment in the variety the children have, the openness they have, and the opportunities they have. Absolutely brilliant opportunities. And I want to agree fully with Willie here regarding the 11 plus. The 11 plus opened the door for every child. Every child. And it was, I feel, it was the job of the primary school teachers to stretch every child to its full potential and give that child an opportunity to get on. And I think that, you know, we've done that in Mayobridge, and many children have benefited by that. I think it's great today. Working with the young has been a great privilege for me. And the youth of today, they're so generous, they're so open, they're so willing to help out. If we just tap into that, we can tap into the negativity of their lives, the drugs, the drink, the sex, all that type of stuff. But let us tap into their goodness and their kindness and their generosity and their willingness. All of that is so evident today. And Seamus was just sharing with me something there, and I was delighted to hear it. You know, all the youth club has done for our boys and girls is just unbelievable. And Seamus shared there that not one of our boys or girls have ever stood in a court over 30 years. Now that is absolutely brilliant record, and that's due to the dedication of you, Josephine, and all the people, you know, Sean, and all the people, Jerry, everybody here who has built up our youth in Mayobridge, took on from what the school was doing, built up the youth club, built opportunities for children to excel in all kinds of sport and music and song and dance. There's just a credit to our Mayobridge. I'm just so happy to be part of Mayobridge. I left Rathfraggan when I was 15 years old. And where do I belong? I don't belong there any longer. I only lived there for 15 years. My whole life has been, I've matured, I've grown, and I've learned from the people of Mayobridge, and proud to be part of them. And one day, I hope that I'll be buried with them in Mayobridge graveyard.
Good girl.
May it be a long time away.
Please God.
Well, in my day going to school, you left school when you were 14. But they have great privileges now, as Mother Tractor said, of going on to school until whatever age they want to be, like, you know. You didn't have that. And as Mother Tractor said, if you weren't good at your sums and you didn't have them right, well, you were slapped for not having them. And I wasn't much good at any of those things. What I was good at was sewing or something, knitting, things like that there. You learned all that in school. And you had it to do. Because we used to make our own summer frocks in school. And you learned how to knit gloves and socks and things like that. But I said that they don't learn that now. But they can learn that, I suppose, when they go to bigger schools. I don't know whether they do or not. But they have great privileges. And like, I mean, if they just use, as I always say, if they use their heads and get on with it, you know, they have more than ever we had at school. You were just sent out when you were late, you'd got to go to work. and they don't have that, and it's well for them that has all those things. I wish they were born in my day. That's it, I really do.
Mrs. Gallagher?
No, you're very good at garden. My mother died a past but nobody's in middle school.
Yes.
Go to the walk.
Yes, almost.
Yeah.
That's true. For a lot of people at that time.
Yeah.
Yes. No further school.
Mother
no
died
further-
when I was 14.
Yeah, so you had to. And Ria Roberts probably tried to help you around.
But you wouldn't like your grandchildren to go back to that now, would you?
I would not. Just in hard times. And you had a walk, or you were looking at no bicycle to go to your walk.
You were rich if you had a bicycle.
And you worked for to get that bicycle as well. You didn't have to work to get it, to save to get it. It wasn't just like coming Christmas and I'll hand you a bicycle. Or the bigger ones now, I'll hand you a motor car. That never happened to you.
No.
You had to work hard and tight to get it.
Well, the price of a bicycle in those times was the equivalent of 6 weeks' pay, 6 or 7 weeks' pay. So like that would be, you can calculate what you would earn in 7 weeks here. So like a bicycle would be very cheap now compared to what it was then.
Sister Cochran? What do you think of the changes?
Just the same, we usually left school at 14 and out to work. Not until every day, working maybe. There's 9 of the family of us, and so we all had to go to work. But I think with the children now the majority of them are much better than, in a way, better times and better every way. And the majority of them are very good, aren't they?
Very good.
I think the whole philosophy of life is how you view a thing, of course. That, I would probably say that of anybody and everybody here, I have probably done more slavish work than anybody sitting in this room. And I adopted the attitude that work was fun. It didn't matter what work I was doing, I enjoyed it and had a good time at it. And, people are walking the roads and they're going to keep fit classes. I keep fit class with my work. And I didn't really keep fit classes. That's it. You shouldn't have that. Yes, absolutely. That's the truth. It's what you're content with, or make do with what you have.
And just maybe a few comments from you about what you would like to see in the future, how you'd like to see the future going for yourselves and for the generations behind you.
Well, if life continues as it has done over the centuries, it'll go full cycle. And I'm not being pessimistic. I think over the centuries life has gone full cycle, and they're enjoying very affluent times. I would safely say that there will come a time when it won't be nearly so affluent, and it could be quite difficult times. The easy life, I think the best of the easy life is past. I think life's getting tougher all the time, and the rate of inflation's gone silly. And now you're married couple, buy a house now, it has to be 150,000, you'll hardly get much under it. And, pay a mortgage on that class of dough. And they're talking now about, you'll take it out at maybe 6-7%. I've seen interest rates at 14 and 16%, and they will be to that again. And they get caught in the latter years, and there'll be a lot of them, I don't wish it on them, but my life experience tells me that those cycles come about, and they very often catch you at the wrong time. I can remember one particular occasion where I had to make a large borrowing, and the interest I was paying on it was 16%. So you can figure that out.
Yeah.
But when I negotiated the loan, it was something like 9 come 10, and in a matter of months, 12, 14, 16. You know, you raise a loan and it was 5 over base or it was 3 over base or whatever. The base rate rose up when your interest as well, and you were in trouble.
Is anyone else has some what they would like to see for the future?
Josephine, I would feel that for the future, my hope and dream would be for our youth that they would keep the faith and that God would be part of their lives and that they would remember their roots and where they came from. That we have an Ireland, we live in an island, and that we have an Ireland that was always remembered as an island of saints and scholars. We still have saints and scholars among us, and I would hope...
It was a third model.
Yeah, well, I would hope that that would continue in their lives, and that the faith, you know, sometimes youth are, you know, put down about, oh, they don't believe in God and they don't go to Mass and they don't do things like that. Just last year, as recently as last year, we worked together on a youth Mass, and it was a wonderful experience for me and for the boys and girls who were involved in it. And I found them generous and good and loving and kind, and I found them that they had deep faith. And I know that a young priest came from Armagh to celebrate that Mass, Father Peter McAnenley, and I worked with him in Armagh, and he afterwards said to me he'd been round many parishes giving youth retreats and celebrating youth Masses. He said the one that sticks in his mind was the one that he celebrated here in Mayobridge, at the reverence and the beauty and the spontaneity and the gifts that the children had in celebrating that Mass. That would be my hope and dream for our young boys and girls here this evening.
Anyone else what would hope for?
Well, I couldn't hope for anything but a second said my second, very what you said, I would be. I've been in the same mood too. I would love to see their faith and that young boys and girls maybe pick up their courage and go away to the peace or nuns too as well. But that's it. I hope you will take that advice, you young girls and boys. That's all I have to say.
Is there anyone else wants to?
Well, I would say that events very often dictate how religious or how religiously they exercise their faith. I can remember the advent of the Second World War and the comment in one of the English Observer, I think it was, that previously churches in England had been empty, and suddenly in the first weeks of the war they were packed to the doors, couldn't get them into them. And if you look at the traumatic events here in our own locality, and you look at the response of the young people to the traumatic events, and you see the crowds of them in the church and how they react and how they go to the graves afterwards and various other traumatic incidents. Their faith is there. It's maybe slightly dormant, but it is there. And affluence and the availability of pleasures is maybe one of the things that militates against the practice, the daily and weekly practice of the Catholic religion.
In this past 30 years, 3,300 people have been killed. And that's not counting all the people that have been injured mentally and physically. And I would hope that that cycle has ended for good, and that the sacredness of human life would be realised, because it is very sacred. It's for God to give and for God to take away, and not for anybody else. And that each morning, nearly 5 mornings out of the week, on the morning news, there's a report of a murder in the north or south. And that should not be. There's a fellow man that we should give due respect to, and respect his right to the fundamental principle of that life, that he's entitled to life, and it's not for us to take it away.
I left Rathfraggan when I was 15 years old. And where do I belong? I don't belong there any longer. I only lived there for 15 years. My whole life has been, I've matured, I've grown, and I've learned from the people of Mayobridge. I'm proud to be part of them. And one day, I hope that I'll be buried with them in Mayobridge graveyard.
Well, I would say there's a lot of good changes. Very good changes. They've all a good way of getting to school and home from school and nice dinners from school. All that kind of thing. And early we just had our lunch. That was all we had.
I'm sorry for that.